Hi everyone, it's Thursday night. It's time for our mini lesson. Tonight we're going to finish this baby quilt, this stack and whack baby quilt. So I'm going to show you tonight a little bit about how to set it up for quilt-as-you-go quilting. I'm also going to show you a little bit about using some ruler work, how to come up with a design to put on the Dresden plates, and ultimately how to put on a border. Okay, let's start out with the layout of the quilt. As you saw, I put on the design wall the sort of configuration I would like. So what do I know about this? I know each block is 15 by 15. Okay, so I want to do my sashing 1-inch finish, so I will cut this sashing 1.5 inches. And that's going to be the sashing. Okay, I want my borders to probably be finish out at about 2 inches, so I'm going to cut 2.5 inches for the border. So here's my border. Okay, I'd like to have as much of this border as one piece as I possibly can, so I'm going to have to carefully cut the backing and the batting for this quilt-as-you-go technique. Problem is that my backing is directional. So I'm going to just draw a line on these so that I know I want those lines to go up and down. I know that so this is going to be added. This is 15 by 15, and I want to add about 2.5 inches to that. I'd rather have it too big than too small. Or this piece is easy. It'll be 15 by 15 for both my backing piece and my batting. Okay, this one and this one will be the same, so I will have, so that would be 15. I probably cut this is 17.5 finished, so I'm going to cut this 18 inches high. Okay, so it'll be 18 inches this way and 18 inches this way and this way. So I know I have one center, 15 by 15, okay? And I'm going to, for the top and the bottom, it needs to be 15 wide by 18 high. Okay, so that takes care of those two, and I need 2 of these. So I need 1, 2 of these. I need, these would be 18 wide by 15 high. So I'm adding the extra here. So this one would be sides. And I need 2 of 18 wide by 15 high. Okay. My corners need to be 18 by 18. So I need 4 corners. 18 by 18. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my batting and my backing, and I will be back. I have cut out my backing and my batting for all the pieces. I want to go ahead and make the quilt sandwiches for each of these blocks. So, but before I do that, I have decided that what I would like to do is just puff out this center circle a little bit. So what you can do is you cut out little circles a little bit the same size as the inside, or just a little bit smaller. Then you're going to tuck them inside. And I've got a little stick that I can help to smooth it out. Just put it inside here. Smooth it all out. Okay, if you feel that's not going to stay because you're afraid it's going to separate, what you can do is take little squares of either no-show mesh or some kind of fusible interfacing. This is a fusible nylon tricot interfacing. I'm just going to put this fusible side down here, because I've cut all my backing away, because I have all of these pieces left that can actually be used for some other project. It's a fairly good piece, good size piece of fabric left over, and I hate to waste that. So I'm just going to heat set that down, and that becomes permanent, and it's going to hold that into place so that it will not shift and bunch up with washing. We want to make sure we have our quilt sandwich together. So I am following my diagram, and I'm starting with this block. So I have making sure that this is going up and down, the pattern's right, okay? I'm going to align this with the top left edge, top and left edges. This fabric is Kona cotton, but it was raveling like no tomorrow. So I just took the serger on a narrow 3-thread rolled edge, which is less than 1/4 of an inch, and I'm just going to stitch right inside here, right inside the stitching along the edge to hold the edges in place. And I'm going to do that with my walking foot. So let's go to the machine and do that. If this were a large quilt, I'd probably pin this, but I'm not going to pin it. It's small enough, I can manage it without it. But what I want to make sure is that I have it right to the edge. This edge and this edge are pretty much lined up. And I'm just going to start stitching just inside that serging line, or about 1/8 of an inch away. Okay. The thread that I'm using right now, it doesn't matter, I'm using for this part of it. I am using a green thread to match the backing. I am not washing the batting, or if I have any deep creases, then I will steam them a little flatter. So this is this piece, which is this bottom one. All right, this one is going on top, so I have to leave a margin at the bottom. This is the center bottom, and I want to line that up as best as I can. The last block we did was the bottom right-hand corner, so I left extra batting here and here. This is this piece, so I'm going to leave the extra batting and line up the top 3 edges on this piece. Same thing with this one, opposite of the other one. This I'm going to go leaving it on one side, and I'm going to orient it every time. Same thing up here, leave that border there, here, here. Okay, so the only one that's going to match up 15 by 15 is going to be this exact center, and then it'll match on all 4 sides. But for this, in other words, this will be left, see how I've left this at the bottom? Okay, I'm going to do the other 8 blocks off camera, and then we'll come back together, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to quilt these. Okay, now I have all of the quilt sandwiches basted together. The first thing I want to do is go around the edge on the back. Make sure you have caught it all the way around, especially on the edges. If you haven't caught it, then now is the time to go back and fix it, because once you've quilted this, it's too hard to fix. So now I'm ready to quilt this together. So I'm setting up my machine for free motion quilting. I'm going to be using some rulers for this, so I want to make sure that I'm having something that I can use a ruler with. And these are the feet that I have available to me. I have this one here, which has got just a single opening with a plastic top. This is my least favorite one, but because mostly once it's getting so old, it's not clear in the middle anymore. Then I have another one which is open. It doesn't have the plastic in there. It probably did at one time, but I probably popped it out. Then these are what are considered hopping feet, so therefore this moves up and down with the needle bar. These are stationary. These are flat. I got this one years ago, and it has a single little small opening right here. It's okay. It has a roller ball. This is one that makes it easier to roll along the edges of the rulers. The disadvantages to it is that if you start to pull a little bit, you're going to end up breaking a needle because you have a very tiny opening there. Then this is the one that's made by Westerly, and this is actually my favorite one because it's made for this machine. It is high enough to use with a ruler. You cannot use these with a ruler right here because this is too narrow. It's going to get up underneath of the ruler, and you're going to end up doing some serious damage somewhere. So this one is open enough that I can see where the needle is, and it also is perfectly round, and it's almost 1/4 of an inch high so that it will not hop around the edge of a long arm ruler. Now, if you have a low shank machine, you want to get the ruler foot that is specific to your machine. This is the one that's made for a domestic machine. It is a little bit thinner. I can use both of these. I can use these on a long arm. I have to be careful because this is a little shorter, so it's more likely to get caught underneath of the foot, but it's okay. I mostly buy long arm ones. And there is a disadvantage. Sometimes the long arm ones are can't get up underneath here. This one is no problem, but some of the feet, 1/4 inch ruler is going to have trouble, but you know what? You just don't go behind it. You work it on from another angle. Okay, so I'm going to put this on. And it goes up and down. I want to put this so that down, so when I have the presser foot down, I am able to easily skim. You don't want it, see if I have it too low, it's going to stick. And I want it to just skim so that I can get above all parts of it, just barely. I want it to just skim the top of the fabric. What I usually do is I will just let go of it, take it to its highest spot, then finger tighten it, and then I will screw it in. Okay, you're going to want to test your machine. I am using a lime green polyester embroidery thread in the needle. I'm using regular quilting thread in the bobbin, and I want to test my tensions. Okay, if you get skip stitches, odds are the foot is too high. You could be getting flagging, so odds are your foot is too high. If it's dragging, the foot is too low. But you want to make sure that you want to make sure you lower your feed dogs. Some machines you don't have to. This one you do. A long arm, of course, doesn't have feed dogs. I want to check my tensions to make sure I'm getting even tension. In other words, the knots are forming inside the batting. Stitch length doesn't matter because when you're doing free motion, you are the stitch length. This one is kind of busy, and I have to decide, do I want to put some kind of pattern here? Do I want to just stipple it? I'm not sure what I want to do here. I'm thinking I'm just going to do a normal stipple for the background, and I'm going to quilt all the way to the edges. And I don't want to do anything that's going to take away from the fabric. This fabric is the star of this show. So for these outer blocks, I think I'm just going to do some plain stippling. But the first thing I'm going to do is stabilize this block. I don't like gloves. Y'all know I don't like gloves. I like these things that you can push it around. We're also dealing with a small block. You're not having to worry about tugging a huge quilt from underneath the machine. This could be done on a machine that has only a 6-inch throat space. I always like to start over here, right in a corner. Raise that all the way up, pull this bobbin thread to the top, and just hang on to it. Return that to the same spot, and I'm just going to go around. Okay, I do a couple stitches in one spot, and then now I'm ready to move. So what I do is I'm going to take my ruler right here. I already have a Rubbermaid strip on the back of it, so I'm going to put this. Now this is the problem, that if you have a ruler that's too high for the foot, you can't go behind here. If I couldn't go behind here, I would simply go here. As long as I'm keeping that parallel, it doesn't matter. So now I'm just going to pretend I have feed dogs and just follow it along. What's nice about this is I don't have to keep turning it. So I could come back here. Okay, and the needle's in the spot, and I just follow. That's a little thick there. Okay, and then come down here, and I'm just going to go around. Take your time. And you always want to keep 2 hands on the ruler. Okay. It also might help if you have one of those Teflon mats. Now I'm just going to do some ordinary stippling, and this is where you're totally in charge. On my long arm, this foot is also a hopping foot. By hopping foot, it goes up and down. These are considered hopping feet. This is a stationary. So I'm just going to simply do some regular stippling in here, and I'm just going to go at my own pace, keep an even pace. Now I do have separate videos that show you how to do machine quilting, free motion. But you can do whatever kind you like. You don't have to do any if you don't want to. This is a batting that I chose that I actually only had to do any kind of quilting 10 inches apart. And this is obviously less than 10 inches apart. I could do any pattern fill in here that I have, whatever I like. I'm just going to choose random stippling. I've gone ahead and I stippled all the way around the wedge, and I have stitched in the ditch all the way around the outside of the applique, but it's still too puffy. In the center, it's kind of mushy here. I need to stabilize this some more, which means I need to put a quilting pattern in here. I'm going to go ahead and free motion quilt around the inside of the wedge, right around the circle. So I'm going to start right over here near one of the seams, just about a little bit in front of it. And now lower my presser foot, and here we go. Okay, so I'm going to stitch all the way around. Take your time to just stitch in the ditch right along the edge. Now this is going to be a little tricky, so take your time. You might want to use the Rubbermaid drawer liners to help grip this quilt a little better. And I'm going to stop in the same spot, right at one of these seams of these wedges right here. The rulers I'm going to use, some of my favorites, is this one is an arc. So on the inside of the wedges, I'm going to do an arc here. And I have another one which is a longer arc for this long side. And this will just help give me a design. I have to decide, do I want to stitch in the ditch through here? I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to do it first without the stitch in the ditch, and if I don't like it, I can always come back and put it in there. It's easier to put in than it is to take away. My needle is in the seam, right in the middle of the seam. So I'm going to push this ruler right up against it, and on the inside point between two wedges, I want to stop 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. If you're not sure where 1/4 of an inch, I tend to use this 1/4 inch ruler as a guide because it's 1/4 inch thick. I know that. You can put the Rubbermaid drawer liner underneath of it to help grip it a little better, and then we're going to go a slow and even pace in order to stitch all the way around, all the way to the point, okay? Now we need to quilt these points over here, so I'm going to put a Rubbermaid drawer liner, and sometimes I just fold it in half in order to give me a little better room here. And I'm going to use this curve, and I'm going to just again push one end up against the ruler, or the ruler foot, and 1/4 of an inch away on the point. So if I mark that right there, and over time you just can sort of eyeball it. So then you stitch. Stop at the point. Okay, turn the ruler to this other side. Push it first up against the foot, and then on this inner wedge again you're going to be 1/4 of an inch away. And I know you want to hold on to this with 2 hands, but you can't always do that. That's why it helps to have the Rubbermaid drawer liners underneath to help grip. And stitch to the inside. Okay, now we're going to go down to the center of the Dresden plate, and we're going to again use the shallow curved ruler. And I'm going to put the Rubbermaid drawer liners on either side of the seam that I want to go down. Again, push one side up against the ruler foot, and the other one 1/4 of an inch from right here. And I'll do the next one and I will show you a little better. Okay, and then come over here. And we've finished the 1 wedge. Okay, now we're going to continue and then turn the ruler on the other side. Push it up against, and again we're going back 1/4 inch away from this inside curve. And this time I'm going to show you really, really close. So I push this right up against here. I'm 1/4 of an inch from right here. And a lot of times, yes, ideally is to hold onto this with 2 hands, but sometimes you can't always. And then you just stitch. So this Rubbermaid gives you a better grip. Okay, so now I've stitched to this point. Pushed up against the, see, now I don't, because I don't have a Rubbermaid underneath here, I'm going to use 2 hands. Okay, that takes me to the point. Come over here, and you just keep doing this. Oh, again, 1/4 of an inch away. Again, put the Rubbermaid on either side and use my shallow curve. Here's my seam. Here I'm 1/4 inch away, and then I'm going to sew. And I'm going to keep doing this until I get all the way around. Okay, all finished. So I'll run a few lock stitches. Raise my needle, pull my thread, hold on to the needle thread, go back in the same hole. Needle down, needle up, and then I'll pull my bobbin thread up. And I'm just pull it all up and just cut it flush. All right. Okay, and it looks nice from the back as well. All right, let's do this square in a square box. So what I think I'm going to do first off is stabilize the whole thing, which is stitch in the ditch. I did find these cute little animals that I just traced onto tracing paper. And I found these clip arts, but I think I'm going to put these in the corners, and the first thing I do is stitch in the ditch. I'm going to start in the center. Just lock my stitches, take my straight edge, and just go straight. I'll background quilt all of the inside edges, which is a small stippling. I'm going to go around ditch, and then I'm in the corners, I'm going to just freehand something. Bring my thread up, there's my middle row. And now I'm going to stitch in the ditch along this edge. And I'm going to put the zebra. Just going to center this. I want to stitch at least a half an inch away from the edges. I'm going to put a few pins just to hold the paper in place. So I'm going to stitch in the ditch all the way around. And I'm just going to stitch right through the paper. Let's see what he looks like. I'll work on getting these little bits out later. But here's our zebra. How cute is that? And I'll finish taking this off later. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put down the alligator. Put him in place and just pin him in. And I'm going to stitch around all of these. There is an elephant and a hippopotamus. I think the hippo's cute. Okay, I will be back. Okay, I finished stitching. I'm going to clean them up a little bit later. I haven't gotten all the little pieces of paper out. And this time I'm going to quilt the darker green, and I change it to a darker thread. And I'm going to use this curve. It's nearly is the same as what I have right here. So we're going to stitch the exact same motif that I did in the center triangles. I will finish this off camera. Here are all the blocks on the design wall. They're already been quilted. So now next thing we need to do is to first square up these blocks, because quilting sometimes draws them in some places and not the other. So we want all the blocks to be the same size. After squaring them up, all of the blocks have shrunk about a half an inch, which is normal for when you do the quilting. So each block I cut back to 14.5 inches by 14.5 inches. And so I'm going to start with the center block. So this one is squared up and it's cut evenly along the raw edges, and that's fine. On the sides here, okay, I squared up to 14.5 inches this way. But notice I drew an orange line, which is at a friction marker. That is, if I were to have cut this, I would have cut it right on where that line is. So when we start to put the sashing and the borders on, this is the line I'm going to use considering it's a raw edge. Okay, so once they're all squared up like that, okay, then I need to make sure I have my sashing pieces cut. So these are 15 by 15 inches long, because I'm going to do rows first. So I'm going to go along the center here, so I know that these are 15 inches, so I have 2 going that way, and 2, these are the 15 inches. Although, yes, I'm going to cut them back to 14.5 inches. Okay, and then I have 18 inches for the other 2 rows. So I'm going to stitch these and these. Then the cross is going to be 1.5 inches, so that the direction of the fabric is going this way, and this is going to be the long strips here. I'm going to cut the border pieces afterwards. I'm going to take my center piece, And remember, it's directional, so keep it that way. Another thing you're going to need is you're going to need strips of this nylon tricot fusible interfacing. And you don't have to have this, but it helps to secure things down. And you're going to need scrap pieces of batting. Okay. I'm going to take my backing, put this right sides together here, and again, pin that in. You want this to be fairly accurate. Now I could do this backing in a contrasting if I wanted to, but no, I'm going to keep it the same. Okay. I'll just put in the extra pins just to be sure. Then I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. Okay, I've set my stitch length to anywhere between 2.0 and 2.5 stitch length is fine, straight stitch. I'm not using my walking foot because I want a more accurate seam, and I don't have a 1/4 inch walking foot for this machine. So I'm going to accurately take your time, don't go fast, back tack at the beginning, at the end. Now, because I don't have a walking foot, this is one of my favorite tools because this sort of acts as my walking foot. So I'm going to sort of push down and it slides up underneath. And this sort of acts like a walking foot. I'll just keep pushing it up underneath. If you don't have one of these tools, and these stylists will do, heck, even a seam ripper will work. So you just sort of push it, take your time. Don't go fast. Take the pins out. And sometimes it helps to give it a little pull too. I like this one. This is my favorite. It's got little grippers on there. It just goes under the foot. Really nice. I think I got this from Martelli. Martelli always makes the most wonderful tools. Okay. There. There's that little 1/2 inch. So I'm finger pressing them open, front and back. And I'm going to repeat for the other side, and I'm going to give this a nice crisp press, because the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to attach this other side. So just to the front. So I'm going to pin just the front here, not the back. Pin it to its adjoining piece. I like to use lots of pins. And then from this side, sew another 1/4 inch. Again, back tack at the beginning and the end. Okay. Next, we go to the ironing board. I want to measure the inside here. You want a piece of batting about 1/8 inch larger than this little space between here. And I'm going to I want to fit them in. I want to fit them in rather. It's going to be really snug, and that's what I want. I want a little bit of pressure here so that when I start to sew, there will be no gap. If you have any gaps at all, you need to cut this wider. Yep, that'll work. Then you're going to take a piece of this nylon tricot interfacing, and you want to make sure that it is smaller. This is also too big. And you don't have to do this, but this gives you added security because this presses, fusible side is down, so it's fusing to the batting, because I don't like these to gap, okay? So I'm going to fuse this to the batting, and it also fuses to the seam allowances, just a little bit, okay? And then once you do that, and this is pressed, you're going to fold this over a generous amount, and then you would either sew it down, stitch in the ditch, or hand sew it. Usually I want to hand sew it, but you know what? I'm going to stitch in the ditch. So therefore I'm going to overlap this. My stitching line is right here. So I'm going to go over by about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so anyway, let me go ahead and press these and I will be right back with you. Here is what it looks like finished. And then it finishes on the back really nicely. Here it is. Here's the join on the back. It's hard to find. Okay, so anyway, on the front part, you sewn this 1/4 inch away, press it open. Okay, you're going to take your other block, and again, you want to make that. Here's where you want to make sure all of these backs are lined up in the same direction. So this is this way, and yep, this is good. Okay, then I'm going to put this right sides together with the sashing and pin it and sew it. So this is the second. The first time we sewed, the first block I did was sashing, the block, and the back sashing. So what to add on, I'm going to put in the front to the front of the sashing. Here, pin it, sew it 1/4 of an inch. And I like this nice and accurate. Okay, and I will sew it. I am just sewing the blocks together, just to the sashing. Again, that accurate 1/4 of an inch. Press, open, I turn it over, okay, press this open. I cut my batting strips to 1/2 inch, these extra pieces. Open this up and put it, and I'm going to squash it inside. So I'm going to make it fit. It sort of is bowed, and that's okay. So you put it in on each side first. Sometimes it helps to have the little stylus help you do it. Just fingers work fine. Don't put it underneath. Put it right on the inside here. And yes, it's bigger than the space, but that's all right. I want it to be compressed in there. Okay, put this on the top, fusible side down, otherwise you'll be messing up your iron. And that's going to keep that from separating so that you'll never feel the lump. I want to press this open. And you need your Elmer's washable school glue. So I'm going to fold this over, and my stitching line is right here where I sewed the seam together. I'm going to make this a little bit wider, so about 1/8 of an inch wider. So I'm just going to fold this a little wider and press. And then put in my glue right inside the seam line. You're going to go to the machine. I'm going to change to the lighter green, and I'm going to stitch in the ditch here, and I'm going to stitch in the ditch on this side, and that way it will seal the back down at the same time. And you can't tell at all from the front, and you really can't tell from the back. Okay, so I'm going to prepare the other 2 rows in the same way. Okay, now I'm working with a top row. So my piece has the border section on it. So again, I'm starting with the center. And I'm going to pin here, pin all the way up. On the backing, you will pin all the way up. On the front, maybe not. I'm just going to go to the end. I don't have to trim that at all. Okay. I really don't need an 18-inch piece because my border is going to start right, will cut across this way. So I really only have to go, I might go a little bit above it. Alternatively, what I probably recommend now that I'm looking back on it, I'm going to sew this front sashing all the way to the top. Unless your border is really light, it will not show through because it's the same color. It gives it a little bit of stability. You could either cut it off if you've got a light border, or just go ahead and just go all the way to the top, sew it all the way to the top together. Okay, and now I'll put it on the other side. Here's one helpful little trick. Okay, I'm going to want, when I sew the next one on here, I want it to be absolutely aligned with that edge. So what I'm going to do is, all this is folded over. I'm going to take a pen and I'm going to mark where the top is on the wrong side. Okay. Same thing on the other one, because this would go across. So here is the top, and just go across. This one I did on the right side. You want to do this on the wrong side. So you flip it over and just draw that line so that when you align things, and that's yes. Now this is on the top border. It's not going to matter. I'm using a friction pen, and that friction pen is going to bleach out this green. So I normally don't use this. I would use chalk, but if it's on the wrong side, it's not a problem if it bleaches out the wrong side. When you start to put this piece on, okay, and you go to match this up, when it's on the wrong side, see how you can see the edge? So you would want that to go directly right there on that edge. That way those are going to match up. I know if you've seen some quilts where they put the pieces together, the rows together, and sashing, and the top and bottom lines are misaligned. Okay, and the same thing at the bottom, it's an even edge, so I'm going to make sure that it is even here as well. 2 spots you definitely want. You can ease everything else in, but this top and this bottom have to match up. Because now that I've sewn them together, see how this is right in alignment with that one, where I did put the mark on the outside. Like I said, don't normally put that mark on the outside, just wanted you to see it. Okay, when I did my stitch in the ditch, I missed some spots right here. Or I just put a pin here. I'm going to come back and hand stitch just these little tiny gaps that I missed. I'll do that by hand. I've decided not to quilt the sashing because it's small enough and it looks fine. Now I'm ready to put my rows together. So I've got my center row, and we're going to do it just like we did before. My sashing strip. It's not quite long enough. However, I have noticed that if I take it from selvage to selvage on the inside, it's actually going to work. So what I'm going to do is take an extra piece and just add it to the ends on each end just to make it longer. I don't need it to match because this is going to fall outside of the border. So you'll never see that it's pieced. On the rows, I put the sashing on as usual, and the backing fabric on the back, and you need to make sure that it's going in the right direction, and it is. On the ends where the border goes, here is where it's going to end up being. That's the end of my 14.5 inches, and this is my line. So I'm going to actually draw this, and I have pink chalk here. Remember, don't use a friction marker. It's going to, especially if you're using Kona cotton, has a tendency to bleach out the color. Okay, now when we come over to this section right here, where I've got a lot of times these don't match up. You want these to match up perfectly. So I would mark on the wrong side with chalk exactly where both sides of that vertical sashing is. Same thing on this side. Okay. And then of course on the end. Well, the end is easy. Okay, the end is right here. Alrighty. So now when we're ready to put our rows together, okay, this is the bottom row, this over here. Okay, so now where I start pinning is I want to make sure my ends and my sashing pieces meet. So I am going to take this right here, and I can see where those lines are, and I'm going to pin both sides of it. Now I know that is going to match up. Same thing with the end. Okay, I can see my mark, and I can see the edge here. So there's my edge, and here's my mark, and they both are matching. So I'm going to match that right there. Then I'll start pinning it in between. Same thing on this side. I'm matching them to the sashing on either side. Same thing here. Sometimes you need to stretch it a tiny bit or compress it a little bit. You can do that. And then we sew our 1/4 inch just like before. So let's take a look. These are lined up perfectly. So is this one. Because a lot of times, or I'll push it, sometimes you'll see them look like that, to where they're disjointed, one isn't meeting. So like sometimes they'll be like this, and they don't match all the way down. So this helps it to match perfectly. Okay, so now we put these together. I'll press this and turn it on the back, fill it in just like we did before. Turn this over and then stitch and ditch it down. I'm going to go ahead and finish these 2 rows, and then we'll go talk about the borders. I've decided to cut my borders 2.5 inches wide. That'll finish at about 2 inches. This is the easiest part, because now we're just going to start, we're going to line up the borders with the orange line that I made across. Do top. I'm doing I think the sides first, but you could do top and bottom if you like. Usually we have all raw edges here, but we don't now. That's fine too. We just want that to go across where the line is. I'll put a few pins, and I'm going to just sew a 1/4 inch, and I'm going to do that on the 2 sides. Scoot this down under here. Okay. And then this end, I'm just going to simply cut this like that. Okay? And then I'm going to sew it. And once I have it pinned, I am simply going to sew a 1/4 of an inch seam. Again, you could use your walking foot. Okay. So anyway, what I'm doing is sewing the 2 sides first, one side then the other, press them open. Do the same thing at the top and the bottom, press it open. Then now over here, I'm just simply going to trim this off. I'm going to make this even straight across. And then I'm going to just stitch the edge of it down, and see the border is already finished. When I'm all finished, I will quilt the outside here, trim it up, and bind it. Okay, I've finished quilting it and binding it, and the quilt is all finished. I'll show it to you in a minute. Remember these leftover pieces that I put together from the last video? These are from the leftovers. Well, what can you do with these? Well, let me show you one that I have finished. This one was from one of my students. She had done a king-size quilt with this very, very bold print, and these were the leftovers that she was pitching. So, you know, the little wedges at the end. So this is what I did with the end of that quilt. I think it turned out really cute, and it's actually one of my favorite quilts. So now let's take a look at the finished quilt. Here's the finished quilt. It turned out really cute, and it's all quilted. I even did a little bit of quilting on the borders. Let me show you. Here's a little bit of quilting that I did on the borders. I just did that freehand, and it's bound, and this quilt is finished. So that's all I have for you. I hope you'll enjoy making stack and whack quilts. They're fun and they're easy and they're fast. If you have any questions or comments concerning this quilt or about the channel, then send me an email at waltzquilt@yahoo.com, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions or comments. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And I will see you next week with our next project. Bye.